It's another episode of the Better Learning Podcast. I have Matt Beaudreau with me today, and I've been watching Matt, and somebody else recommended and be like, hey, look what they're doing over here. And as I started researching a little bit more, seeing the work that he's doing with Apogee, and he'll talk a lot more about what they're doing, I really thought it was good for our audience to hear this, because typically our audience stays in our lane of education, of like formal, of like this is the way, the traditional way of doing it. And what Matt's doing is really it's insightful for everyone to hear about it, be thinking about it, and just hear a different perspective that we may not be hearing when we go to these educational conferences. So that's my long-winded intro. Matt, welcome to the show.
Oh, super kind, man. Hopefully I can be of service to everybody, man. You and I were just talking. I appreciate anybody who's in this space, whether we have the same, agreement on how to tackle, any perceived issues or real issues, whether we have the same, that doesn't matter. We are on the same page if we want to help young people, and we want to move this country forward. So anybody that's on that mission, whether we see eye to eye on everything is not the issue. The issue is I want to help you however I can, and I appreciate your service. So I'm honored to be here, brother.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, one of the biggest topics that we talk about is we're radically student-centered, where if we can keep the student on like why we're actually doing what we're doing, the better off we're going to be. Can you give a little bit of your track of I usually ask people to start where they're a student, but I'm going to give you the option. Do you want to share a little bit of like what school was like for you, or do you want to start where you start identifying the problem?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I like that. I'm going to start with what school was like for me, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Because I remember very clearly at 4 years of age, and I've said this on a couple of shows recently too. It's kind of funny that this came up. But I remember very clearly, I'm a November baby. I started kindergarten at 4. And I remember at 4 years old, maybe I was 5, but I remember it was kindergarten. I was put into the red group for a reading exercise that was going to go on. And I remember looking around the room. I remember sitting at this table, and I remember going, okay, those are the people that need the most help reading. None of those kids can read. Those kids are a little bit better than them. Those kids are decent. And this is the table of the best readers in the class. Interesting. Okay, we're being grouped together. There's a game here. I remember picking up the game as a youngster, and then I remember very clearly in 3rd grade, being 8 years old, going, man, I know this game inside and out. I don't think I'll ever get anything less than an A, and I'm not going to have to try. Now, that's not a testament to me being that smart. It really isn't. It's a testament to me just seeing that there are patterns going on here and there's a game to be played. So school for me was easy because I knew how to play school. So I could focus on the other things that I wanted to focus on. I wanted to focus on being social. I wanted, friends, sports, girls, like that was the focus. School part was easy, but I left, meaning I graduated from high school with my 4.0 and went, I don't really know who I am or what. I have nothing. Like, I don't know. I know how to play school and the world wants something different. What do I do? I guess I better go to college because that's the next version of that. And everybody's doing that anyway. So, and it was no different, man. I got done with my 4.0 in college and went, cool. The world doesn't care. They want to know what I can do, what I bring to the table, what's my skill set, what's my pet. Like, they want to know all these things. And I'm going, I can score really well on multiple choice tests. I know how to write the essay that teacher wants to hear. It's not necessarily what I believe or what I would say, but I know how to write what they want to hear, so I'm going to get my A. And that's not a skill set that I really want for the kids that I'm serving, right? Is how obedient can I be? But that's where I was.
So I had somewhat similar. I wasn't getting the 4.0. I figured out how to get by. I knew if I did this much effort, it gets me by, and
Sure.
And does so in a lot of ways the same thing, playing the game.
Yeah.
Like I was always one. I'm like a pretty good test taker, so I'm like, all right. So if I can get past that test, then it lets me do other things. But very similar that I think we're in roughly the same generation.
I look older.
I've having that hair for a while.
You got the stuff. I got the gray hair, so I don't know. Maybe so. I'm 40. I am 40. How old am I? 44.
All right, I'm 47. So
okay.
I think that's right.
Well, that makes me even more angry because I'm really younger, but I do look older. So that's fine.
But that was kind of the default thing of our generation. Like if we were gonna, it was like we were told by our parents of like go and like this is what success looks like. Do good school to go to college, and then I think there was this realization that that's happening a lot to our generation of like, well, maybe that's not what we want for our kids. Like
Well,
maybe that path that was like really like considered the only one or where people
right.
were pushed isn't the
And
same anymore.
I think there was a period of time where there was a little more validity to that too, right? Where it's
Sure.
like the college degree, I do believe did matter more, or at least to a larger degree for more, it was a better filtering mechanism. It was a more important calling card. It was something that I think was more relevant for a small period of time, although I don't think it was inherently the most relevant thing at all. I think it was more relevant. I do believe we have gone relatively far away from that. And part of that is anecdotal because I see it with the organizations that I work with and speak to. I see it from, I hear it from the CEOs and hiring managers. I've had high school students at campuses that I've created who were working degree required, and I'm using air quotes for anybody listening, but the job description says degree required, and I got high school students who are doing that degree or doing that job while they're still in high school. So I've seen this over and over where it's not necessarily relevant for as many people anymore. But yeah, that's how we grew up.
All right, so let's pick up your story then. So you realize after college you go through that. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
what did you do then? Like, what were those options that you were faced with, and where'd you
Yeah,
go?
so ultimately, what ended up happening, I got a job, or I was offered a job at the White House. I actually spoke to somebody at the White House who talked me out of it. So that's where I thought I was going to go. So I turned that job down right upon graduation. Now, I've always had a good work ethic. I was working, 3 part-time jobs to put myself through college, but it's still, I graduate and I go, I don't think I want to extend being a bouncer here at the bar and managing this apartment complex and working as a teller at Bank of America. Like I have to do something. I have a degree now. I got to do something, right? But I still didn't know who I was or what I could do. So I luckily got into a management, quote unquote management position at a retail store. And these experiences, at least doing the best that I could, ultimately land me about 2.5 years after graduation at Stanford University. So I started working at Stanford. And that's where I really started to examine the game of school from the inside at the university level. And when I say game, I mean game. There's a game around admissions, there's a game around donors, there's a game around endowment. There's all of these games playing out. Naively, I went, okay, cool. I see these young people. They're a few years younger than me. They're a lot smarter than I am. But I seem to be a lot happier and doing, I'm okay with life. They're really good at OChem, but some of them are really stressed out. And how do they not fall down more? They don't know how to write a check. They're crying here in the office. Like I'm seeing some of these things. Naively, I went, okay, well, I'll fix some of this. I started doing corporate training there. I'll fix some of this. I'll go be a teacher. I'll be a teacher and I'll help the students now to make sure this never happens, that they're not struggling this way. So became a public school teacher in California, went into public school administration, private schools, all of that while diving into why do we do school this way, which led me to go, well, I don't think this is about kids in the first place. And now I have some of my own. So I'm going to build something that I want them to go to. So that's a 30,000 foot overview of a decade.
All right. So was there a turning point? Like, was there that moment that, like that story where you're like, man,
Yeah.
it hit me right here and be like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, there were a couple. There were a couple that really kind of combined together. One being a public school teacher, seeing progress with some students, but being told by administration, nah, they need to score really well on algebra because we need this. And it's like, nah, this kid needs to not be selling drugs when he goes home, and just being labeled. Creatively insubordinate is what I was told I was, which I took that as a compliment. So being labeled that way, reading Seth Godin's "Stop Stealing Dreams" was a big turning point for me. Going, I have to be able to look myself in the mirror, but I got to be able to have something for my young people. But it was really, if I point to one thing, it was reading the work of John Taylor Gatto. And he's not somebody that teachers and administrators, you're going through and you're getting your credential and all your licensing. You don't get to read his stuff. Now, this is New York State Teacher of the Year for 30 years, wrote all kinds of great books, very articulate man before he passed. He is somebody who I believe is a hero within education, but we don't hear his name in educational circles because he is a foremost historian for why we do school the way we do, and the fact that it's really not designed for human growth and behavior. So it's more of a behavior management tool versus you know a growth tool. So reading his work was the big turning point. But I mean, I'd say that's 4 or 5 books.
Okay. All right. Um, what was the philosophy? You're like, all right, I'm gonna go do this on my own. What was that kind of
Yeah.
core tenet of like this is a way I want to try doing it differently?
Yeah, that's a great question because I had my oldest at that point was getting ready to go into school, and so I had started to lean into the work of Gatto and Maria Montessori, and had toured some of even the Sudbury schools, which are far to the other side, and I started to just see the need to really, one of the things you said at the very beginning, and I don't even remember if this was recording or not, but you said something about student centered. And I believe conveyor belts, what I call conveyor belt schooling, really is system centered. I don't
Right.
believe it's there are great educators there who do focus on the student, but they focus on the student in order to still funnel them into that exact same system. So for me, all of these amazing educators truly were about creating as close to an individualized student centered organization as possible. And my big thing was, with the way my dumb brain, the only way I could really see it was, why doesn't their day look more like a microcosm of what life actually demands of them versus how to play school? You can be really good at school and then go to this game of life and you're like, wait, I don't, this isn't this. Can I go to the bathroom? I don't know what to do now because you want to play school because you've done that for 16 years. That was my philosophy, was how close can we make this to a real life environment and trust kids that they'll step up to the plate.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we're definitely in agreement there because
Yep.
that is, and I think to Ted Dintersmith, who I've had on the show, and
Yeah,
he's
I know
done,
Ted. I don't
yeah,
know what, but I know but I have spoken to him a little. Yep.
yeah, and and he's created kind of a movement specifically around more of just not about the game. Like let's do real work. Like let's do very
Yeah.
like not even just PBL, but having project based learning into more real life things, and has
Right.
done very well. But he keeps coming back to it's like it's an educational system for a reason. Like there are
Right.
so many complicated things that make it the system, which
Right.
again then pulls out the real
That's
reason of like why, what do we actually care about here? Like,
correct.
are we trying to protect the system, or are we trying to provide the best opportunities for kids to learn and become adults?
That's it. And so many educators are stuck going, I want the best environment for kids, but I'm also required by administration, the
Hmm.
state, whatever it is, to play the game. And they're really trying to bridge the gap, man. And my heart breaks for them. I was in the position, I was there,
Yeah,
and I don't want to play a game though.
yeah,
And I don't do well with rules.
yeah.
So
Which eventually I want to get back to that, but I want because I do want to get to is those people that are in that situation because there are a lot of them. Like I talked to a
yes,
lot of them, a lot of them that I would call the change makers, but they don't really know. Like they know what they're doing isn't the best thing. They see the system, they're frustrated with the system, but they don't
yeah,
know really what else they can do. And but then we're also seeing the ones who would be like, you know what, I'm just done with the
I'm
system.
out.
Check me,
Yeah,
I am out, but I
yeah,
still deeply care
yeah.
about the mission. So Phil, let's go back to your story then. So you got a son that's about ready to go into that, and you're like, no, like how do I actually as a parent prepare my kid
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that? What'd you start doing?
Yeah, so I had in that last year, the last year that I worked in what I call again the conveyor belt system, which is just the traditional model that we're all used to. And I say conveyor belt because public, private, a lot of times mimic the same thing. So it was my last year there, and I really told them at the beginning of the year, "Hey, this is my last year. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have to figure something else out." So that was where that last year I started going and doing a deep dive into alternatives, quote unquote alternative systems. And so, I started taking a look at Montessori's. I started taking a look at Waldorf's. I started taking a look at Sudbury's. I started taking a look at a number of systems. I found one that was beginning to become more prominent. They were still on kind of this upward trajectory, but I really liked a lot of what they were doing. So I ended up tying in with another organization called the Acton Academies, ACTON. Loved what they were doing. And I decided, you know what, that's what I'm going to try to build. When I leave here, I'm going to try to build one of those. and I'm going to see, what happens if we get 5 kids and that's it. And my oldest daughter is one of them, and then my other 2 kids can grow up and they can go into great. That's great. Then we'll have 5 kids and that's it. If it doesn't work out, we'll home educate until we figure something else out. That's fine. And that was really my mentality. So I finished that year researching how to be successful with that, and then took another year while I was building that community to start building out a separate business too, where I started traveling and doing a lot of speaking for corporations all over the world. So I had over 200 flights that year, did like almost 70 keynotes that year. But I got to also speak to, again, hiring organizations, CEOs, managers, to hear about what they're not seeing from the college grads too. So I get to take that in. So that's where we end up going. So my first school that I launched was underneath the Acton Academy umbrella.
And I've followed them a little bit. For people who aren't familiar with it, how would you describe their philosophy and approach?
Acton Academy utilizes the Socratic method, which I love. They are very much learner driven. And I want to be very, very clear. I'm a fan of Acton Academy. I launched a few Acton Academies. I helped owners in Acton Academies. I was involved there, ran a few campuses for a number of years that I helped create. I want them to be wildly successful. There are also things there that Tim and I didn't want to do. So Apogee is not the same as Acton. I want to make sure I'm clear on that, partially just to honor Acton Academy. Great folks, not us. We're different than that too. But that learner-driven model, where the ideal is that you have a guide who is in there, not a teacher lecturing, but a guide. That guide never answers questions. That guide's role is to get out of the way as quickly as humanly possible to allow a learner-driven model to take place. Very much using the Socratic method, very much using real-world projects, apprenticeship-based models for older students. Without diving into too much of the tricks of the trade, that's kind of the overarching concept.
Yeah, and so you can see how that one. Really, I feel like that really resonated with people and started getting people to think about, because it was one of the first ones that I heard about too, and be like, ooh, should that be something that I pursue with my kids? What I love and is the fact that education in general wants to learn from each other. So it's not, I don't think there's one that, anyone has ever figured everything out on here. But if we start sharing all these lessons learned and things that are doing well, we're going to iterate our way to a better system. And hopefully that system does become more student centered. So Acton had some of their things. Where were the things that now, like when you and Tim started breaking off, like what's that philosophy like?
For us, what we're building under the Apogee umbrella, we do love Socratic conversations. I think those are still great things. We want to foster curiosity. We want to foster good conversation. And so what we focus on is the rules of a good conversation, so that the content isn't necessarily even the most relevant part, so that we understand how to articulate what it is you believe, why you believe it, what is the evidence for that. You can genuinely listen, not to respond, but to listen and understand. And, and you can formulate a dialogue back and forth. It's called civil discourse, right? We used to be able to do that as a society, theoretically. And so we want to get back to that. And then we want them to be brave enough to change their mind if they get better evidence presented as well. So it's the Socratic piece we still utilize. We like the adults to be interactive. We like the adults to, at Acton, no adult is supposed to answer a question ever. None. Zero. Zilch. None. We want to be able to answer questions. We believe in coaching. We believe, if Acton Academy is hey kids, this is a basketball hoop. Here's a basketball. I'll put basketball on TV, but I'm going to stand back and I'm not going to even tell you how the game works or the rules. You're going to figure out the rules yourself. We like the idea of going, okay, here's a coach that shows you this is how to dribble. This is how to dribble well. Here's how to shoot. I'm not going to lecture you. I'm not going to give you a multiple choice on basketball, but we're going to teach you the fundamentals, and then we're going to let you play, and we're going to coach you from the sidelines, and we're going to get involved too and play with you, like this co-coaching learning sort of mentality. So we take that role. It's much more like a summer camp meets a jiu-jitsu gym, more than anything else. Physical education and human physiology is mandatory for us. That's another huge difference. We believe being healthy matters. We believe a lot of the quote unquote mental health problems will go away with physical health being put back on a on a scale of priority. Um, we still get involved in projects and have them tackle real world projects. We still like apprenticeships, but we have direct mentors too. We partner with mentors from all over the country. They have very specific bigger challenges and little challenges that they take on to give them a wide array of opportunities to work. They are very entrepreneurial. They're still starting businesses. But one of the other big things for us is mom and dad also go through an educational experience while their kids do too. That's a huge difference too.
Talk,
Mom and dad
yeah, talk
have a
through that.
very specific roadmap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what does that look like? Well, maybe it would help and be like, who's finding you, like, and what does that journey look like? If somebody like, hey, I was over here, this isn't working for our family or whatever the situation, our family, our kid, whatever that
sure.
situation that's saying. How are they finding you, and then like what does that pathway look like? What does life look
Yeah,
like for them? Because I think it's really easy for us to see what it looks like in the traditional system because we've gone through it
sure,
or we're going through it.
sure. Yeah, the one of the biggest disconnects is that people think it's wildly different, right? Like, no, we still have a physical campus. The kids still go there. They're still there with other kids. They're just not together with only the people of their same date of manufacture. They're not pretending that life works in subjects because it doesn't. They're solving problems together. They're having conversations together. They are doing academia together, but they are individualized. They do have options on how to tackle the academia, and they've got somebody there not lecturing. They don't have an adult staying completely out of the way. They have somebody in there almost acting as a tutor at that time, right? And so the tutors are continuously walking around. Older students are sometimes tutoring younger as well, but the academia still gets done. And then they collaborate with a general developmental range to solve bigger problems and put on, they're going to put on a Renaissance fair this year. They're going to go through a whole survival project where they learn to build shelters and light fires. They're going to start their own business. They're going to do a mock Shark Tank with local entrepreneurs. They're going to do some real world things together, but it's in the context of a normal quote unquote school day, right? So it's not crazy wildly different to where people are like, what the, it really isn't. Schedule wise looks the same. We just give them choice, and it's more of an inspirational place. We're not, nobody's having to worry about a standardized test or to barf out, regurgitate something for a grade or play that game we were talking about earlier. It's more of a microcosm of the skills that the world is actually going to require. Mom and dad. So as far as people finding us, Tim and I have big mouths and we go on a lot of podcasts. I mean, that's really it. We're not doing some fancy, email marketing and running ads and some drip campaign. No, we're just going, hey, we're building these. Anybody want to come? And we've got people who are affiliates now who are launching these campuses. We had our first year, just Tim and I going, hey, we want to build campuses. Who wants to come with us? We had over 400 people apply. We had 50 that we went with, and so they're launching campuses to here in this fall of 2024. This last year we had 900 apply. We're going through that process right now, so we'll have another 100 campuses for 2025. That's how we're doing it. It's not anything fancy or crazy.
Yeah. All right. So two things. I want to finish the thought, and I want to come back to these numbers because to me this is like the heart of what our audience needs to hear is that this is in high demand. Like
Very much.
I've been hearing people talk from the school superintendents that I know around the country to just being involved in this industry long enough that you're
Yeah.
hearing stats of people of things like we just lost kids after COVID. And there was like this whether it was 8 to 10%. I heard that number out there, but every local district is dealing with this issue where their enrollment, unless in most cases their enrollment is going down, unless there's certain pockets of the country where just the geography is growing that's creating that, and there's not enough digging into why is that the case. These kids are not lost, they're going somewhere and they're seeking something else, and until we recognize this, this is to me like the heart of the issue in education right now. It's like this is I feel like we're sitting here as the taxi cab industry and acting like, oh, we're all good, we just got to get better at tracking our little rates on this box here that shows the score, and we'll get there. In the meantime, the whole world is evolving, and Uber and Lyft and now Waze, self-driving, all this stuff is happening, and if you're not paying attention to it, it's going to feel like it's overnight, but it's not overnight. This is going on right now.
And it's been going on, and it's only going to continue to go on at a faster pace.
Yeah.
School has a big, giant, clunky, disgusting system that's self-perpetuating with so many dang parts. It's overcomplicated, and so it's going to have a really hard time ever changing unless everybody gets on board really, really quickly.
Yeah. And for the listeners that have listened to this show evolve over the years, like, there's moments where I have like this optimism, like, all right, there's some really awesome leaders in here. We're driving change. We're doing this. There is a huge piece of me that is on the side of like, I don't think our system's going to work fast enough. I just don't. I think it's going to blow up, and we're going to have to look at what's there. And, like something else is going to happen. I don't think it's necessarily going to look like, hey, public school doesn't exist anymore in this country. I think it's going to be there, but there's going to be a tipping point where the majority of the country is seeking alternative ways, and that system is still just there.
That's correct. And I believe the same. And again, I think there are some wonderful humans who are working in the system. I think there's wonderful humans who send their kids into the system. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. And in fact, public school needs to stay. Government schools need to stay because there are some young people who those are the best humans they see all day, because parents aren't necessarily good humans, right? And some of theirs, like when they get to those campuses, those are the best humans they meet in their childhood. Like, I want that to continue to be a thing. But the system itself is going to remain the system. And one of the things that we are trying to do is to build a viable, accessible alternative. That second word is I think key in this whole thing. An accessible alternative for everybody that will at least force a comparison, if not a change. I use CrossFit as an example quite a bit because, love them or hate them, most people know what CrossFit is, and they have an idea, at least, of what it is. And you can't argue that the organization was wildly successful, and it also forced some of your big box gyms, your 24-hour fitness, your Bally's, your Gold's gyms, whatever, to offer, CrossFit style classes and cross train right there, because people were demanding it at such a high level that they had to at least implement a little bit of change. We're trying to take a similar approach. If we get this as a household name that's wildly accessible to, then let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can force some change that way.
Yeah, I love that analogy, because that's exactly what I feel like is going to happen. Is they're going to get forced to do it and be like, holy crap, this is going on. How do we do it? We could either try to recreate it ourselves, or do we now like learn from what others are doing and start
and maybe bridge something over, and let's see, right?
And to me, that's the optimistic. Is it may look ugly a little bit for a little bit, but the long run, that's where I'm very optimistic in that if we bridge this, if we keep talking about it, if we allow the experimentation, or I call it the fragmentation of education to continue to happen, we're going to get to a better place as a whole.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. So talk through the parents, because you were talking about like the parents are actually going through some of this education too. Man. What does that look like?
That's a big part too. So we've got Apogee Man, Apogee Woman. So all of our verticals are designed to be able to stand alone as well. So we have men in the men's program and the women's program that are going through for their own education, but they don't have kids, right? I mean, that's a thing. Like, when we've done that for now a year and a half, just to test and make sure that we're solid, make sure what we've developed is as good as we think it is. And it wasn't Matt and Tim Kennedy thought, oh, well, these will be the cool projects for these guys. No, this is a full-on robust educational experience where we are taking all of these different snapshots of what we call meta skills that matter for everybody always, no matter how fast the world changes, no matter what, there are certain things that matter. So somebody's personal psychology matters. This isn't Matt and Tim putting together a psychology course. It's Matt and Tim putting together in working with Jordan Peterson, working with Todd Herman, who's a sports psychologist, and working with people who are ninjas in those industries. So they help us put together a month that is really focused on, and it's only a month at a time over the course of 12 months. You can't fully, flesh out a whole subject, but it gives you enough work to go, okay, I've got something to come back and keep working on too. So we're walking them through their own personal psychology, and there's a lot of experimentation that they're doing around that to put themselves into more of an ideal state. It's really Plato's concept of the forms or the ideals. So we're walking them through exercises around that. There's books around that. They're put in one call every week where we are on there coaching them through it, but then they also have small groups. And when we have them on the call coaching them through it, we're also bringing in a guest mentor that week. And by guest mentor, we might bring Todd Herman in. We might bring Tulsi Gabbard in. We might bring Jordan Peterson in. We might bring Andy Frisella or Alex Hormozy or professional athletes and actors. And we're bringing really good humans in who have other value to bring. So we have that structure there for them to intentionally move forward. So we've got personal psychology. We go into their time and energy management. We go into the physiology, the health and nutrition of it all. We go into their spiritual walk and how to actually engage. We tie that in with civil discourse and how to identify logical fallacies and engage in effective communication and leadership. We'll go into intentionality around marriages. We'll go into intentionality around parenting. There's my roosters. You hear the roosters in the background on a farm.
You're waking them up.
Right on cue. We go into creating a legacy for the family and legacy traditions. We go into self-reliance, sales, marketing. We do a massive deep dive into how the game of finances actually work, the different games that are available that were never taught in school, but we go into those with the parents as well. We want them to be educated and have this growth mindset so that when their young person comes back from school and they're all fired up about growth mindset and moving forward, mom and dad are on the same dang page. That's important to us. We think that matters.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting and really cool. I mean, all those names, I would say this is what I say too, is I feel like I have a unique view in that I spend like half my time in like pure like education ecosystem, like formal education ecosystem. And then I have the other half of my time is really with entrepreneurs who have like this huge growth mindset and that are like just really they just have a different view of the world. Like there is no limits that are kind of over on this side, and there's a lot of people of the names that you mentioned, the coaches you have, like that you're involved with, and it is like a huge divide. Like it is a huge divide. So I feel like I'm sitting in the middle here. I'm like, man, it'd be really nice if we can connect some of these things here. But there is a divide. I mean, where I'm optimistic. I feel like I'm the one that's always saying, like, I think the middle is bigger than the extremes. And what are the complaints you're hearing? What are the things that are working? But also, what are the things that you're like, man, like this still isn't working? Like, I know this is a broad question, but I really want to get to the heart of like why the people who are immediately going to reject everything that you're saying. What are those bridges that we could start bringing across?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The biggest problem that I think all the others stem from is we have in our culture what I consider to be a religious affinity for the way school is designed. There's not an understanding of what the history is of the school, and this is why I say, hey teachers, hey administrators, I dare you to go read John Taylor Gatto. I dare you to go look at the history of why school looks like it does. I dare you. It's a behavior management program, is what it is. But we have grown up now in this program. It's been around for 120 some odd years. You and I don't know anybody that's, as old as you and I are. We don't know anybody that's older than 120. So mom and dad went through this system too, right? And so we don't understand that, no, that's not true. We do understand. We just have this emotional attachment to the way school is. That's what so many people are suffering from. So I can walk people through intellectually and go, okay, so gosh, Kevin, you're 47. Great. Do you read at a 47-year-old level? Why is that funny? Does that sound?
Yeah, I know.
Because we say it to our kids like
Yeah.
it's a real thing, right? We say it like that's a thing, like grade level is a thing. Kevin, 47, I'm 44, so obviously you make more money than me, or you have a better relationship with because you're ahead. If not, are you behind or am I ahead? What is that like? None of this is real, but we say it for school, right? And we got this little narrow view of academia, which again, by the way, I took a standardized test not that long ago. And ironically, I think Lockheed Martin had just paid me $40,000 for an hour of time. Um, and I funneled that through the various trusts that my family has, and then to a foundation where I'm able to give freely and scholarship people. I've got a pretty decent financial system set up, but I went back and took the standardized test. Now, remember, this is a former straight A student who also scored really well on the SATs and got into colleges. And I came in at a quote unquote sixth grade math level. Why? Because I don't use that particular math. I could go back and teach myself, but I don't use that particular kind of math. Other people do, for sure. I don't. Hey, humans are different than one another. So this is the problem. It's the religious belief. I can walk people through all these things from a logical standpoint. They're like, yes, 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 yes. Oh, but grade level. Oh, but my friends, my mom, they say their kid is able to read at this level right now, and mine isn't. Something's wrong with him. I got to throw him in that system. I got to do. It's that religious thing, and we're so wanting to keep up with the Joneses on that we miss the opportunity to get educated. That's the biggest problem. And
Yeah.
all other problems stem from that. People, oh, well, what about college? What about socialization? Well, all these things that, again, I can logically go through and decimate any of those arguments, but it's still, oh, but everybody's going to school and I want them to go to prom. And, it's that religious affinity.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I go, hey, man, I
Yeah.
get it.
No, I'm
I
with you. I mean, there's a cultural component to this, right? I mean, to the point of like you think of like the local communities, a lot of comes to the pride of the football team and the sports team, and yeah, and once you start doing that, so I told you earlier, I moved out to Arizona in
Yeah,
2017, and
yeah,
it was fascinating because I came from the Midwest. I grew up Chicago area, lived in
yeah,
Ohio for a long time, and it
yeah,
was just literally, it's like wherever your house was, that's the school you went to, and those were the
sure.
friends that you had, and went.
That's right.
Arizona has approached it very differently from the rest of the country for really the last 30 plus years, where they've been the most like open charter school state. Um,
Yeah,
and to do that, it's open enrollment. So
yeah,
if I went into like to my neighborhood park where I live right now, start asking around like where kids go to school, and you may have like 12 different schools
yeah.
sitting there from the same. So there's a lot of positive and a lot of things that are like you can debate on there, of like a lot of positive. You have a ton of choice, like ton of
Mhm.
choice, ton of options. I'm individually frustrated that a lot of the choice all went into a similar direction. It
Mhm.
really didn't get as wide as it should
Widespread.
have.
Mhm.
Because to your point of like keeping up with the Joneses, all of a sudden one does well here, and then every parent is like, "Well, I want to go in there," and there becomes a lottery, and like this whole
Yeah,
demand of like
yeah.
just human psychology. We know that's what happens.
Yes, sir. Right.
But there's also been the divide on the communities then, and it turned into this like protectivism that I think you're talking about, of like, well, you can't do that, you can't do that. Now, like I lost my local football team because they're going to different ones. But that whole rant just came down to is it just people got protective and be like, that's not the way to do it. We like everything that we it's just, I was used to having everyone at the same school. All my friends were at the same school, and that hasn't. But there's so much to be learned from this too. That's the piece that I want everyone to hear about. Is what parents want other options, and there's valid reasons why, and it's not only because they're anti public education or
Right.
something like that.
That's right. That's not always the thing. Is that And of course you do get some people, and we're very clear, like on our campuses, there's a filtering thing that people come and they're like, hey, we hate the fact that, masks were used and there's the CRT and there's, okay, cool. Yeah, cool. Maybe not. Great. That's fine. Hey, here are our values, and we expect people to be really good humans, and we expect you to work really hard. How does that sound? We're gonna give you opportunities, but this is like joining the best gym in town. We're gonna have all of the right equipment and the right trainers, but if you don't come work out, things aren't gonna get better. You're not gonna get in better shape, right? So it's like we want to make sure everybody's coming together around these values. We don't have to agree on every detail of everything at all, but are we going to be a good person, treat each other the right way, and work really hard to try to figure out, how we can be the best versions of ourselves? That's it. That's what we're looking for. That's
Yeah.
all. We don't have to focus on the
Yeah.
other stuff, left, right. Otherwise, we don't even get involved in politics. It is, look, let's be good humans, and there's a million opportunities. There's a million ways to get educated. Let's tackle all these and see what we can do.
Yeah. All right, we're getting close to wrapping up here, but I do want to hear, because I'm an entrepreneur on the side. I know anything high growth, there's always challenges that come with that.
Sure.
Where are you guys at right now? Like, what are the problems you're trying to solve right now? Because we all know, like, it's never just a straight arrow. We got
Oh,
it right the
gosh.
first time, and and we're just going to keep doing this because we
Yeah.
figured it out.
Yeah. Do you have another hour? So, yeah, no. Again, each one of our verticals is designed to stand alone. The hardest part is organizationally making sure they cross over, and then again, accessibility for where we want to go and getting there fast enough. So here's what I mean. So we've got, the men's educational program can stand alone. The women's educational program can stand alone. Young men's, young women's, home education families, school affiliates that are launching these, and we're supporting those school affiliates. Um, so we are 7 days a week right now supporting all of these various groups and trying to connect them with the schools, the campuses becoming the hub for education for their entire community. So we want people to see, hey, this is not just an average K through 12. We operate a little differently. There's more freedom here. We also want mom and dad associated with this. We want them very much involved, but not just involved by coming and telling everybody what to do and volunteering for PTA. No, no, no. We want you to be involved by pushing your own growth forward. And then we're going to have live events that has the public. So we're building out really a massive infrastructure. And as we're doing that, again, the accessibility is always what it comes back to. So believe it or not, one of the most difficult pieces lately is developing. We have two foundations, two 501c3s, both different types of 501c3s, so that we can get different types of funding opportunities to help scholarship. 100% of our foundation money goes to help families in some manner. 100%. There's nobody that gets paid out of that. 100% goes through that. But then we had Stripe come along, and some of our business being virtual, they went, we don't necessarily like what you stand for. We're taking your money. We go, we're standing for strong families. That's what we stand for. Strong families, educated families. That's it. Yeah, but we're not hearing the inclusive language that we want to hear. So we're going to take your money. We're going to hold your money. So it's stuff like that that makes it really hard. So we went, cool, that must be an opportunity. We developed our own payment processing system, our own. And now, instead of us making money on the margin like Stripe does, we take that extra money and it goes into the foundations, to scholarship, to make things accessible. And so, it's little things like that you don't expect that end up taking up the most time, right? It's the back end tech of it all that ends up taking up the most time. It is teaching other school affiliates to have these conversations with parents who are just hammering home the religious affinity they have for conveyor belt schooling, right? It's those kinds of things that are just the little tiny things every day that take up the most time. So there's a multitude.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, as we're wrapping up, is there anything I didn't ask that I should have asked?
Oh man, it's if anything, hey, where can people go to help? And this doesn't help. This isn't helping Matt. This isn't helping Tim. This isn't helping the foundations. If you're like, yep, this is awesome, but I would love to be able to help scholarship young people to have this opportunity. I'd love to be able to, whatever that looks like. Reach out about the foundations. I'd love to be able to spread the joy that way, man. So apogeestrongfoundation.org is a great place to go. But no, sir. Great questions. Great conversation.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for your time. To the listeners, this is what we want to do. We want to be opening up different opportunities and voices that you may not normally hear in the circles that you're in. So that is exactly why. And this is a perfect example of coming from one of our listeners said, "Hey, we need to have Matt on the show." So thank you to that. BetterLearningPodcast.com is the hub where we get, you can log in, listen to all the episodes. We'll have show notes and everything on there too. But we also have on there, if you think it'd be a good guest or if there's topics that you'd want to hear about, that's where we get and we go through that with our production team and try to figure out, all right, who is it that we want to invite to be on the show. So great example of our listeners in this community of change makers in education. So Matt, great talking to you. Great meeting you.
You as well, brother. Thank you for the work you're doing. Very much appreciated. You did a great job here too.
The views and opinions expressed on the Better Learning Podcast are those of myself as an individual and my guests, and do not necessarily represent the organizations that we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.